Recording in progress.
Colleagues, if you could take your seats, please. But then we're immediately going to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councillor Oliver. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council. We are being both audio taped and videotaped, and with me remotely, I have Councilors Danberg and Lipoff, and I think otherwise, except for one councilor who I think will... We'll hold. While we're holding, congratulations to Councillor Oliver and his graduation of his son this evening, a very wonderful event. Great job, Sean, you've done it. Now you just got to get him out of the house off to college. And then Thursday, Councillors Kalis and Krinsman are going to have their own momentous events. First one for Councillor Krinsman, last one for Councillor Kalis. So I hope that as many of us as possible can be there, not only to help cheer them on, but also I think it's a wonderful way to show the community how much we care about our kids and the education that we provide. Ms. Moore, are you ready yet or not? All right. Well, I don't have anything else to say for the moment, and you certainly don't want me telling jokes. So I will say that we have two items on second call. One was a chartered item, which was chartered by... Is that my signal, Ms. Moore?
Testing.
Who's not hearing us? No, that just means no one listens to us, Councillor Lucas. So we've been joined by Councillor Malachy, which means 22 of us in the chamber, 2 at home, so we have a full complement this evening. And we're still going to wait, obviously, till the audio's set up. Do you want us to take a couple-minute recess, Ms. Moore? Why don't we take a 3-minute recess, everyone, and then we'll reconvene. We stand in recess for 3 minutes.
Testing. Nope. I may have to talk to IT. I don't know what's... I'm in the chambers with everyone, yeah. There's, I've done all of them, yeah. Switch to phone, audio settings. Nobody on Zoom. Nope. I'm testing all of them. Nope. No, I'm testing to find out things. None of them are working.
just say testing or.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can anyone on Zoom hear me? This is Rachel Sherman from the IT department.
Yes, we can. We can hear
So
you.
they can hear me, so it's something to do with the microphone at this. Thank you, sir. So Carol,
Wait, unmute yourself. I mean, mute yourself, sorry. Okay.
I can also hear you, Rachel.
And I can hear you, Counselor Danberg.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's the microphone in the chamber that has a problem.
Colleagues, our IT people will be here in about 5 minutes to try to fix this. There's some problem with the sound in the chamber that's not going online, so we'll just stay in recess. I'm sorry about that. Time to get a snack or a drink, this type of drink.
Sorry.
Good.
Can Zoom hear me, please? Anyone on Zoom? Can you hear me now?
Let's see, Danberg left. Maybe Rick will come back. You know what? We should be able to tell the green little bar isn't moving. That's fine by me. Testing.
So right here. No, I keep missing it.
Rick, can you hear me?
Oh no, I can't.
Yes, I can.
Can you hear anybody else?
No,
Me
but
neither.
they may be able to hear us, so I'd be careful.
Testing.
Okay.
Testing. Counselor Danberg, Counselor Rick Lipoff. No.
Okay, I need to get underneath. Hi, can you hear me on Zoom? Sorry for yelling. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, but nothing else in the chamber.
Yes, we can hear you. Same. Nothing in the chamber.
This is Josh in the chamber. Can you hear me?
Can
Yes.
you-
We can, Josh.
Okay, that's something.
That's from your microphone?
Can you
Yes.
hear me, Counselor Lipoff?
Yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
We can hear you. Good.
After that brief interlude, we're going to get back to business. So we are going to start, as I noted before, we have two counselors participating remotely. We are being both audio and videotaped. And with that, we're going to start with land use. Counselor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report, but I would like to assign some public hearings.
Please go ahead.
Starting on page 128, requesting a public hearing for item 257-24 for June 18th. Also for June 18th, item number 256-24, also June 18th, 255-24, 254-24, and 253-24 on the following page 129. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Counselor Kelly. Chair Baker for the Zoning and Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee report is found on page 125, and we have one item on second call, and we have one item from first call, which is number 23024, reappointment of James Miller to the Auburndale Historic District Commission. The committee voted to approve that reappointment 8-0, and I move the report.
Thank you. Next, I have Programs and Services. Counselor Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report this evening.
Next, Public Safety and Transportation. Chair Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report. I just want to mention to everyone that on Wednesday night we are meeting, and on our agenda we are taking up the topic of parking policy again, starting to brainstorm some different ideas and examine the issues in greater detail. And we'll be looking for more opportunities, both at regularly scheduled meetings and perhaps in off-cycle meetings, finding nights that other committees aren't meeting to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. Next, Public Facilities, Chair Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was no meeting, and therefore there's no report.
Thank you. Finance Committee, Chair Gentile.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Real Property Reuse, Chair Danberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report, but I want the committee to know, and the entire council, that there will be a meeting on Wednesday, June 12th. Normally, our meetings are on Thursday. The meeting will be on Wednesday, June 12th at 7 p.m. Somehow, it was left off the schedule. So please make a note of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Danberg. And with that, Ms. Moore, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I apologize, but can you confirm that 49-24 is on second call, the electrification ordinance?
It is on second call.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly. Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 24 yeas, 0 nays.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on to second call. We have 2 items on second call. The first is 18924. This relates to the 75% design of the Washington Street pilot. This item was chartered by Councilor Oliver last time. Chair Albright had already given the report on that item. So Councilor Oliver, I'll recognize you first, and if there's others who want to speak, can raise their hands afterwards. Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. First off, I apologize for my casual attire this evening. I'm still a little overheated. So I originally put this item on second call for reasons I mentioned last time. Or sorry, not second call, I chartered it, which put it on second call. I
Councilor
guess
Oliver, could you move a little closer to the mic or straighten it up?
Sorry,
Thank you.
sorry. I was trying to get that right and mess it up. All right, I'll just proceed from here. I had chartered this item because I needed more information. I wanted to understand a lot more about how and what and when we were measuring the pilot or the study or the pilot study or whatever you would like to call this redesign of Washington Street. As you saw in the packet on Friday, some of those answers are coming over. I believe that there is still quite a bit, like if I were to consider what a 75% designed pilot would be, there's some details that we still don't have. Details that I've spoken to a lot of you about, information that I hope we can discuss tonight. A couple of the items that I had mentioned before that I was able to get a firm answer on. Several people have concerns about the utilization of ARPA funds. We have to have this under contract or have the dollars, I'm going to use the word committed, by the end of this fiscal year. I'm confident that we can still accomplish that goal, even if that requires a special meeting. And I do think that this pilot is important enough to be able to conduct a special meeting of this body or of the committee, if that's what we deem necessary. I've also, excuse me. Great. All right. I do want to understand a lot more about very specific information about when and how we are measuring. Again, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I keep hearing the echo and think it's on.
Why don't you straighten the mic up, and that might help. Yeah, that's probably better.
Is that better? Even more.
Yes.
There we go. All right. So from my perspective, I'm too loud, but that's all right. I want to understand how we're diverting traffic as a potential problem or outcome, an unintended impact of this study. I believe that we have heard that, yes, we will have measurement on Austin and Watertown streets. I want to be a lot more specific than that. If, for example, we start to redesign this stretch of Washington Street and we're diverting up to 20% of the traffic off of Washington Street onto Watertown Street, my back of napkin math, given the numbers we have from HSH already, tells me that those two streets are going to have roughly the same amount of traffic. That's wrong. Watertown and Washington streets are not the same. One is completely residential, one is not. I want to understand if we're diverting traffic that's going to be heading to Nonantum on the east and into West Newton on the west. No pun intended there. Also, there are guidelines. If anyone else here has read the 355-page report from HSH, they reference several best practices that we are not following. We are not measuring the traffic impacts within 1,000 feet of the perimeter of this study. We're measuring one of them, but not all of them. I want to know why. I want to understand what benefits or problems this pilot is going to create in West Newton in particular. West Newton's already problematic. I think we know that. For all these reasons, I'm going to make a motion that we send this back to committee. I feel very strongly that the conversations in front of us are best suited for committee work, not here on the floor. This isn't something we're going to address with a couple of amendments, in my humble opinion. Let's send this back and get the details right. Thank you.
There's a motion by Councilor Oliver. Is there a second for the motion? Seconded by Councilor Block. Discussion now on the motion. Councilor Gentile.
I just wanted to clarify something. My colleague from Ward 1 mentioned a deadline on the ARPA funds for the end of this fiscal year. And I believe we're talking about the end of the calendar year. So I think it's just an important distinction to make.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. I'm going to recognize Councilor Albright.
Just on that point, the other important factor is that the money has to be not just obligated but spent by the end of '26. So we have a very short time frame to get it going and get it finished.
Can I just clarify to make sure I understood it? I want to make sure everyone else understands it. According to your information, Councilor Albright, appropriated by the end of calendar year 2024, spent by end of calendar year 2026.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
That is
All right.
accurate.
So just, again, be armed with that information as you deliberate on what to do here. Others, Councilor Leary, then Block, then Downs, and Wright.
I would strongly urge my colleagues not to send this back to committee. I want to remind folks that this is a pilot. There's no concrete, literally and physically, changes going on here. It's all paint and movable objects. This has been vetted really well. It's no pie in the sky kind of project. It's been well vetted. There's been a lot of data, but some of the data we will get more of as we go through the pilot, and changes can be made. This is exactly the kind of project that many Newton residents have been asking for: more options for getting out of their cars, more walkable, more safe walkable areas, more bike lanes, giving people option. It's just what we need in an area where we're going to see significant growth. We don't want to continue to just prioritize cars. If there are problems, which I do not think there will be significant problems coming up, we can make changes and adapt and adopt. And in fact, a pilot is exactly what does that. That's what we're going to be doing. That's how we're going to find the data. I would remind my colleagues that those of you that remember Nonantum Road as a 4-lane road, it is now very similar to what we're proposing for Washington Street. It's a much safer, the traffic still goes very smoothly. Yes, there are backups just because we have more cars since that was done over, I think that was probably 12 years ago, but it is much improved. This is a slightly different project, and it is a mix of residential and commercial. I think it will be just what we need to mitigate the number of the traffic along Washington Street and encourage more vibrant village areas, getting more people out of their cars. Please, we can't delay this project. We need to vote for it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Councilor Block.
Thank you, Mr. President. I attended this Public Safety Committee meeting, Public Facilities Committee meeting on May 15th that reviewed the final version of the 75% design. I watched the presentation by the Transportation Planning Consultants, HSH, and I was most eager to see queuing analysis. I was surprised that none was presented, so I asked about it. I was assured they had the queuing data and that it would be a metric during the pilot study evaluation. I followed up my interest in queues by asking Chair Albright where I could find the queuing data. She sent me a link to the 265-page report prepared by HSH. Fortunately, my civil engineer neighbor showed me the most important summary information that was displayed, and if I could ask Ms. Moore to put up the first slide. I show you figure 7 from the HSA report. This provides queuing data at 95% for the future condition traffic at the weekday AM and PM hours. It's maybe a little hard to read. That legend in the upper left-hand side shows you that, let's see, the PM numbers are in parentheses and the AM numbers are without parentheses. I don't know if you can zero in on the right-hand side to show the Lowell Street data, but the queuing traffic continuing on Washington Street straight ahead is 695 feet. So you might ask, how many cars are in a queue that's 695 feet long? Well, we all got a memo on our desks today from the planning department that suggests 25 feet per vehicle. My vehicle is 15 feet long. It's a Subaru Forester. It's probably about average. So using 17 feet, allowing for 1 to 2 feet distance between cars, this means 41 vehicles is what this 695-foot queue would represent. The HSH data tells us this will happen 5% of the time. It doesn't sound like much, does it? The way I think about this is that there are 220 working days in the year. 5% of 220 is 11. So 11 days out of the year, this degree of queuing will occur. That's what this data is telling us. Now, you may think that's not important. That's a matter of judgment. I think it's pretty serious. So how far will the Washington Street queue extend? That question would be answered by translating this data into a queuing map. If you could show the next slide, Carol. This is an aerial photo. Well, not that, but this is an aerial photo of the distance that is going to comprise this pilot study. And I say this is a study. The pilot is an adjective. And this study is designed to inform us, not provide benefits. This is supposed to inform us about what will work and what will not work. You can see those little red lines in the middle. The longest one is 500 feet, and the shorter one is 100 feet. So you can get a rough idea of the scale of the queues, and it's not really that hard. It'll take somebody 2 days to translate the data that they already have into the queuing maps that will help us understand how it backs up. Does it block side streets? Does it block parking areas? How is this going to work? So the more I looked at this queuing data, if you could return to the previous slide, Ms. Moore, the numbers for the queues that I kept looking at were Washington Street. I'm sorry, Walnut Street. It's not that different from Lowell. We'll eventually get there. You've seen those numbers. You see what it's like. The distance between Lowell and Walnut is relatively short, and I really want to know what the queues are between those two cross streets. Those are incredibly highly used streets, and we do not want to disrupt that traffic. So, is this going to work if we extend it to Lowell to Walnut or not? And this stretch is outside the pilot. This stretch is where our main post office is. This is the stretch where the post office parks its vehicles. Am I out of time, Mr. President? Do I need to ask for a little bit more, or am I?
You do need to ask. How much more time would you like?
How about 2 more minutes?
Councilor Block has asked for 2 more minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Go ahead, please.
The purpose of this study is so that we learn what's going to work and what's not going to work. And this stretch at the far right, you can see Walnut Street is the farthest vertical road. That's outside the pilot area, and we have to bring it into the pilot area. We've got to see if this is going to work. And in my personal opinion, not being a traffic engineer and not being a designer of studies like this, that should be the first thing we do, the first thing we measure, the first thing we figure out, is this going to work or not? Because it can't just end at Lowell. Something's got to happen to the cyclists and the vehicles that are going through this redesign. And if we can't figure out the ends, then we just have to rethink this. That doesn't mean we don't do some of this. We can make this safer without doing all this stuff. We can get some of the benefits, but that's the part that I want everybody to consider. And so, in my view, we need to send this to committee because there's a lot of work that can be done and should be done. We need to determine whether this section of Washington Street between Lowell and Walnut can be added to the pilot. If it's not possible, how will vehicles and bicycles transition from the pilot road to the existing road design? And if it's not possible, how does that affect the long-term goal of redesigning all of Washington Street? The pilot study should be designed so that we learn how the road redesign will work at its most sensitive and vulnerable intersections. In my opinion, that must include Lowell and the Lowell to Walnut Street portion of Washington Street. This 75% design that is before us is not ready for our consideration, and I will be voting to send it back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Next, I have Councilor Downs.
Thank you, President Laredo. I'm delighted that Councilor Block wants to extend the study beyond the current parameters. I do think we have the budget we have, and we have some time constraints on it. I do not have my colleague from Ward 1's optimism about the ability of this city to turn around and commit ARPA funds and spend them in the time needed. We love perfect projects. However, politically, the perfect is often the enemy of better. And in this case, I think moving the project over by a half a mile and giving it a new beginning and end point, while perhaps desirable, is again putting the perfect ahead of the better. We have studied this, we have discussed this to death. This is a good trial that will tell us something important. It'll tell us if we are moving traffic to Watertown Street. It'll tell us if left turns become impossible off of Washington Street. I don't think that's likely, but it will tell us that. And it'll also give us an idea, and there is a way for bicyclists to transition at Lowell. One reason that Lowell and Walnut was not selected was because the traffic volumes are higher. Before we move a pilot to a higher volume section of the street, I suggest we see if it will work in a lower volume section. So I will not be voting to return this to committee, and I suggest we vote on the item before us.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Next, I have Councilor Wright.
Thank you, President Laredo. First off, I'm on the Washington Street pilot, supposedly on the working group. And in the past 2 years, I've probably been invited to 6 or 8 meetings, and usually just before a public meeting of where it is. I'm not invited, I'm not part of the discussion where they're making decisions, or very rarely. I want to point out, just over a month ago, I did suggest adding to see how much traffic is diverted on Watertown Street to do a count over just off of West Newton Square. And our memo that we received from Planning Department last Friday, or on the 30th, said they weren't going to do it. But yet, I know Councilor Oliver requested that last week, I believe, too, and then we get an email today, yes, we're going to do it. There's a lot in here. I don't think it has been that well thought out. I want to bring up Councilor Block. Looking at the data and at the turn and going straight ahead, at Chestnut Street, going westbound, you have 218, I believe it's 218 turns and 318 going straight. We had left turn only there when they were doing the West Newton Square redesign. And that backed up traffic so far, and so many angry emails, things like that. They tried it for about 6 months. It just did not work. So we had to allow that lane to either go straight or left, not a left only. Now, taking this back at Lowell Street, because we're going to be one lane starting from Lowell going west, at Lowell, that's going to be a left turn only. That is going to back up traffic, which already backs up traffic sometimes past Walnut Street and go farther. And when people are going, and I drive this way too, you're going westbound, you think you don't expect to be stopped there, and you're gonna block traffic on Walnut Street. There's more traffic turning on Washington Street onto Lowell going left, so we should have there left turn only and make it one lane from Walnut to Lowell, so it'll ease that transition to go into the rest of it. I would like to see the pilot go on both sides, but at least on that side, I think it's very important, because it's going to block traffic quite a ways, just like it did block traffic past Dunstan Street when it was at Chestnut Street. So I think it should go back, and I think we should take a look at it, and there's still plenty of time before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Next, I have Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, President Laredo. I want to second what Councilor Oliver and Block had to say. They've done a lot of work researching the pilot and the analysis and the traffic studies, everything that we have received so far. I can't second what Councilor Wright said, because I'm not on the Washington Street pilot working group, but she made some fine points herself. With respect to the pilot, and I know we're talking about a motion to send it back to committee, but I want the pilot to succeed. I am, in principle, in favor of narrowing the roadway from Lowell to Chestnut. I am. I've had many, maybe not many, but I've had some problems with the work that has occurred up until this point. And I do believe further work is required from city staff, the consultant, and even us to make sure we get this right. Because I have this feeling that once we approve that 75% design, that we're going to go forward no matter what, even if the results aren't exactly what we see. And I want to make sure we get this right. So I do favor sending this back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Next, I have Councilor Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. Where to start? I think I want to start with page 24 of the report that Councilor Block referred us to. That page talks about volume, the traffic volume. I don't know how you translate traffic volume into queuing data, because the volume tells you how many cars at different times of measurement there are. That does not translate into queuing information. There are charts, and I didn't just send Councilor Block a 200-page report and say, go look at it. I think I actually told you the pages that had the queuing data in it. I hope I did anyway. But this particular page 24 is the chart that we looked at, is only volume at various points in time, and that data does not translate into queuing. I had a conversation with Ms. Martin and Mr. Cobb, who said that the level of service is a better way to measure the queuing issues, and that they don't expect the level of service to change between what's going on now and what's happening in the future. There's no expectation of change, so if it does change, we will have learned something from the pilot. There are other two-lane roadways. I learned this from Mr. Cobb. We have other major roads that are 2 lanes that carry more volume of traffic than Washington Street does between Lowell and Chestnut. And I believe Commonwealth and Beacon are 2 of those roads, and there's only 1 lane of traffic going in each direction. So, and there's no reason for us to have more queuing than we expect that we have now. I do want to say that last week I was supposed to have a meeting with the off-leash dog people to go look at the Walker Dog Park, the potential Walker Dog Park. So I parked my car on Walker Street and I had to cross Washington Street. It is very difficult for a pedestrian to cross Washington Street. There's 2 lanes going each way. People are speeding. It's unbelievable what speed people travel on that roadway. And it is simply not safe to cross that street. So we will be doing a service to the community if we have this pilot, and hopefully it will work. And if it doesn't work, as Councilor Leary said, there's nothing that can't be moved and changed as we learn. They did agree at a request that President Laredo made earlier in a public facilities meeting, and then at a request seconded by Councilor Oliver. They have agreed to do more measurements earlier on. They won't do quarterly for the whole 3 years because it's just out of the league of the ability for us to pay for it, but they will do 3 months and 6 months and then annually, which will give us good data about what's happening there, and things can be changed. I hope that we can pass this tonight, because we need to get this pilot on the road, get it going, learn from it, and it will make a huge difference to the people living in that area. You cannot cross the street there now. It's too dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Councilor Kalis.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I am very sympathetic to Councilor Block and Oliver and what they spoke to. Also to Councilor Wright, you should never be treated that way when you're on a subcommittee like that, and I think that's something for another day. But I do hear you, and I hear the trepidation because this is a big change. But what I'm hearing is that you want too much, in my opinion. If you had said, this is the issue, or these are the 2 issues or 3 issues that I want addressed, and it was navigable in 1 meeting, I would be with you, and I'd say, yeah, let's send this back, because you've kind of defined what your concerns are, what needs to change. I'm concerned, though, by listening, that there will be other concerns, and the concerns will continue to evolve because whatever's proposed is going to evolve. And there's always going to be these issues, and that's why it's a pilot. By definition, we're going to learn, it's going to change. The pilot as it is right now is not going to succeed. I know that because pilots, when they start and when they end, are very different. We're going to learn along the way. So So that's where I stand. If you could come back and say, you know what, this is my major issue, it can be solved in one meeting, I'd probably be okay with that. But the way that it's being presented, I think, is just too much. I do think that I'm very concerned about the money, making sure that we spend it in the time frame and getting the learnings. That's the most important thing. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kalis. I'm going to get you in a moment, Councilor Oliver, but Councilor Kelly, you've not spoken yet, so go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I raised my hand after hearing Councilor Albright talk about trying to cross the street at that location. And about a year ago, all of the councilors from wards 2 and 3 walked the entire length of this together at morning rush hour. So we experienced what this was really like and what the intersections were. And I appreciate what Councilor Kalis said. I keep thinking the same thing. This is a pilot. This is why we're doing it. We're trying to learn. We can adapt. We can change. As was told to us earlier, it's only paint. There are no new curbs going in. There's nothing that's irrevocable, nothing that can't be changed. We can learn. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is it's not just the goal of getting people out of their cars and choosing to walk or bike instead. I now live on the north side, and it's about kids, students, riding from the north side to Newton North more safely than they can now. It's providing that bike lane for them to safely get to school. Right now, it's an iffy situation. Where can they cross? How do they cross? How do they get from the north side over to the other side? And I'm not sure that will really affect how people think about the question before us tonight, but it will be an immediate help to lots of students who will be able to ride their bikes to school more safely, just the way it's laid out. When this first came up, we got, I'm going to say hundreds, I didn't count them, of letters from people, residents, north side, not the north side, wards 2 and 3. Most of them were in favor, very much in favor of doing this. Some were not. Some were worried about overflow and how the traffic may be switched to Watertown. But I think, I want to listen to those people, and I want to give this pilot a chance, and I want to let the kids who live on the north side ride much more safely to Newton North High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kelly. I don't see anyone else who hasn't spoken once already. So with that, Councilor Oliver, Councilor Block, Councilor Wright, and then unless someone else has something to say, we're going to vote on the amendment. Go ahead, please, Councilor Oliver, and you only have about 30 seconds left, so do you need some more time?
I think I might need to ask for 2 more minutes.
Why don't we give Councilor Oliver 3 more minutes and hope he can do it in 2. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Go ahead.
Okay, 2-minute drill. All right, here we go. Councilor Kalis, I totally hear you. I don't want to go back to the drawing board. I agree with Councilor Lucas. I want to support this. I want a good outcome here. I'm concerned that everything we're talking about, being able to cross the street safely, from whether you're a pedestrian or bicyclist, yeah, that's why we would do this. I'm more concerned about the unintended outcomes. I really am. This is about pilot design and process, not the outcomes. That's all the objections I heard here were outcomes. They're all great. I want that chocolate cake too. I want it to be safer. I want it to create a better roadway for everyone. I really do. I just don't think we're at 75% of a design to achieve that because we're not listening to the unintended outcomes yet. Councilor Kalis, 3 things I want to see us answer. And I direct your attention to the memo we got at 3 o'clock today. I believe it's the second answer. Will you confirm you're only making changes to the road configuration when indicated by data? No. We will be making changes to the road configuration as merited throughout the duration of the project. Based on what?
Councilor Oliver, can you just, again, move the mic up and say that sentence again?
Certainly.
Went quickly.
Everybody has a copy of this memo on your desk. Turn to the top of the back side. Is it too loud for you, Councilor? Yeah, I understand. The first answer what are you going to be making changes on if you're not basing those changes on data? I have a problem with that. I don't know what that means. I want an answer to that. If you move down to the very next one, I want to understand, we intend to petition the state to change the posted speed limit from 35 to 25. I kind of think that's a one-way road, people, no pun intended. I'm lying, that's a pun intended. Are we gonna undo that if this pilot creates a bunch of traffic on other roads? I wanna know. No one is talking about that yet. Those are the questions I really want an answer to, very specifically. There's also, I wanna understand, the third one is the third from last on that same page. Why are you still not measuring or utilizing HSH best practices? We're not doing it. I want to know why. They're in their memo. Let's get an answer. Finally, I'll just wrap it up by saying, folks, this is not just a pilot. In speaking with Jen Martin, Jen Kyra, and the planning department, this is going to end up being a baseline. What we learn here is going to be applied to the entire length of Washington Street, probably Beacon, probably Calm, possibly, Center Street, and more. This is a massive undertaking that has implications way past this 3/4 mile stretch of road. We need to get the design. We do need this to be closer to perfect than it is today. Otherwise, there's no way we're going to be able to measure if it's better or not, if we're not looking at all of these unintended consequences. That's the best way I can summarize it. Let's get a couple more answers. This isn't a reset. This isn't a just keep exploring forever. Let's do the right thing here, because this is going to have implications.
You're out of time, Councilor Oliver.
Way past this 3/4 mile stretch of road.
All right, thank you. So I've got 4 folks who want to speak. Councilors Block, Wright, Downs, and Albright. Councilor Block, you have no time left, so
Give me a minute.
How much?
1 minute.
All in favor of allowing Councilor Block to speak for an additional minute, please say aye. Aye, go ahead, please.
Calling this even a pilot study is laughable. It's belied by the fact that people talk about this being a 10-year study. We need 12 months of data. We need to see what the seasonality is for doing this. We don't need 10 years worth of study of this. Sure, there'll be changes, but anybody who even thinks about it that way is not taking the concept of a pilot study seriously. And that is also why I believe it's so important to include the Lowell to Walnut Street stretch on this. If we don't do that, we're kidding ourselves. We're not going to collect the data that we really need to collect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Block. I have Councilor Wright. Councilor Wright, you have 2.5 minutes left.
Just real quick, I want this to work. I go on this stretch of street multiple times a day, by bike, by foot, and by car. And I know how difficult it is, but I don't want to put up something that's going to fail miserably at the beginning. That transition at Lowell, I think, is very important to get that right. It's a quality of life. When they did West Newton Square, people are just on their horns constantly, and I can't even enjoy my backyard because of all the horn beeping until they change the light signals, until they change, the left turn only, things like that, which took some of them months. We need to take a little bit closer look to get the finished touches on that. It's not at 75%, so I think it should go back to committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Councilor Farrell first, and then I have Councilors Downs and Albright. Oh, and Councilor Maliki. So we'll do Farrell, Maliki, Downs, and Albright. Go ahead, please, Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, President Laredo. I've been reluctant to speak up about this, but there are a couple of things that really do weigh on my mind from the very beginning, and that was the last statement that Councilor Block made. I don't understand why this is a 10-year study. I think anything can be done in 2 years, certainly. And I just don't get it. I think if you went out 10 years, you'd never change it back to anything. People wouldn't allow it. The second thing is I have great respect for Jen Martin, but this reducing the speed limits to 25 miles an hour, I really want to know how that's going to be enforced. I can tell you that there are lots of streets in this city that have 35-mile-an-hour speed limits, and people travel at 40 and 50 miles an hour, and it's not enforced. There's a very dangerous road around the corner from where I live, known as Dudley Road. We had another huge accident on it. We've tried to get the police to patrol this road. This road should not be traveled by anyone at more than 20 miles an hour. And someone about a week ago on a Saturday night was going in excess of 50, flipped their car, and did a lot of damage. I mean, so enforcement of 25 miles per hour, I really would like to understand how that's going to go. Thirdly, I understand crossing these streets is hard. Part of the enforcement, again, is how are you going to get people to get the traffic down? And lastly, I just don't believe that the people who travel on Washington Street or Beacon Street or Commonwealth Avenue or Dedham Street, even though the limits right now are 35 miles an hour, nobody goes that speed. And we're not enforcing any of these laws. And I think that's a huge issue for Newton and traffic. So this, again, I have great respect for Jen Martin, but I don't get it. I don't get how anyone is going to patrol Washington Street, even for this short period, and get people to travel 25 miles an hour. The first thing you'll have is the cop stops the car, there's no place to pull over, you're gonna have a lot of backup right there just trying to stop one car. Anyhow, thank you very much for these few musings.
So, colleagues, this is Councillor Farrell's first speech in the chamber. No. And just as a reminder for anyone who's watching at home or on new TV, it is our custom after someone speaks for the first time in the full council to applaud. It does not mean that we agree or disagree with the speaker, although we all appreciate his words and the fact that he spoke this evening. So next I have Councillor Malachy, and then I'm going to go back to Downs, Albright, Leary, and then, folks, I'm really going to suggest we try to wrap this up and vote on the motion. So, Councillor Malachy, go ahead, please.
Thanks. First point, I'd just like to read from the Ms. Martin's memo of today, or response today, June 3rd. The reason to not include Lowell to Walnut stretch. A road diet in this section of roadway would likely have greater impacts on traffic and congestion. So it seems like we're leaving out the most problematic part, and to spend all this money and effort to test Chestnut to Lowell and postponing till who knows when the area that's considered to be problematic just does not seem wise. It seems like we ought to be doing the whole thing initially. And you know, I'm as curious as anyone to see how it will work, but to say it will work, if we have good results from Lowell West and don't have good results Lowell to Walnut, what have we accomplished? Also, it seems that a lot of the effort to get this approved quickly is so that we can get it under contract, and it's under contract by December 31, 2024, and then spend it by December 31, 2026. I'm a little troubled by the contingency part, because it seems like we've set aside this big amount of money. It more than covers the kind of known, what we think are the known costs, and then we're going to have a contingency amount to cover other things. But it seems like if we put the contingency into the contract and we're committed to spending that money, we might end up spending it on things that just because we have to spend it. And rather than doing that, I'd rather see us contracting what we can under ARPA and leaving the future expenses to come out of free cash or whatever. And if we're only doing it because it's ARPA money, is that a good enough reason? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Malachy. So we have, next I have Councillor Downs, Albright, Leary. Counselor Downs?
Well, I've heard some really interesting things tonight. I've heard that we now are going to put a road diet down Beacon and Calm and the rest of Washington Street, which is, as someone who's been involved in transportation planning, news to me. Yes, it would be great to have protected bike lanes on more of our streets. Yes, that's where we should be going. This is a test of one section of street. It might work. If it works, are we going to say, oh, we're never going to do that again? I don't think so. If it doesn't work, are we going to do it again? I don't think so. So the other thing to think about is further down the line, are we going to, when we talk about a 10-year pilot, we're talking about putting in something before we invest in it to test it out in paint and plastic. Now, if it works, and I don't expect it to be perfect at first, that's why it's in paint and plastic. If it works, if we get to a traffic pattern that works, it will take at least 10 years before we can get the money from the state, because we don't have tens of millions of dollars lying around to move concrete, so that this can be a safe street. Are we going to go back to the current unsafe condition? I would hope not. I would hope we would keep what works in the ground. And finally, I just want to remind people that the vote on this out of public facilities, chair, vice chair, everybody, was unanimous. This is a good project. It's a good way to test before we put real money into it and real stakes in the ground. And I suggest we move forward before we delay it so far that we let $3.5 million of ARPA money slip out of the city's hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Councilor Albright, Councilor Leary, and I'm sorry, Councilor Getz. I'm going to let Councilor Albright go. I'll take you, Councilor Getz. I'll go to Councilor Leary. Go
So
ahead, please,
Councilor
Councilor.
Downs made one of the points that I wanted to make, which is that this project, in its fulfillment of the whole of Washington Street, is literally tens of millions of dollars. And we need this pilot to prove that we can go to the state and have them contribute money for this project. It's not going to come out of just all city funds. So without the pilot, we can't even go to the state to get the money that would take to do the rest of the roadway. When you do a pilot, you can't possibly know all the problems in advance that you're going to have. It's just, that's what the nature of a pilot. And I think, Councilor Oliver, if we could have that crystal ball and say, okay, what are all the things that unintended consequences that are going to happen? And then we can plan for them. That would be fabulous. But I think the point of a pilot is to learn from it. And you can't know all the problems in advance. With respect to enforcement, I think you'll find a lot of people who agreed with your comments on enforcement of speeding in Newton. And I think maybe a docket item to public safety and transportation to discuss that issue with the police department about how we're going to enforce speeds on our most hazardous streets would be a really good thought. And if this pilot doesn't work, we can take it apart and put it back to the way it, if there's nothing about this pilot that we don't like the bike pathway, we don't like the 2 lanes, we don't like the left turn lane, whatever it is, we can put it back. I mean, God knows we had that terrible project that happened in Newton Center many years ago that was backing up traffic all the way to Route 9. And
Councilor Albright, you're out of time. Do you need
Okay.
another minute or so?
a half a minute.
Why don't we give Councilor Albright another minute? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Go ahead, please.
So we can put it back to the way it was if that's what we really want to do. As to the money, I think that there will be an RFP. We will have people who answer the RFP. We will put the money into the project for the bidder that gives us the amount of money that we have. We won't put extra money in. I'm sure that the mayor will not put extra money into the contract just so that that money will be spent. If it doesn't cost $2.7 million to do this project, I'm sure she'll find another way to spend that money. So I just really hope that we will move this pilot forward, and it's something that our city desperately needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Councilor Getz, please.
Okay, I would love for this project to get to good, and I am actually very supportive of seeing the implementation of the Washington Street pilot. Now, I heed the councilors in the zone, and very specifically, councilors both Wright as well as Councilor Oliver, and then successively Councilor Maliki, as well as Councilor Block, because he is very familiar with what happened at Riverside in terms of traffic. So if in fact there's any way to put a finite amount of time on it being recommitted to committee, I don't know if we can do that, but I do know in terms of looking up the ARPA deadlines that it's actually December 31st that the funding obligation needs to be committed, and that it's actually December 31st of 2024, and then the expenditure deadline is December 31st of 2026. We've already missed the obligation estimate deadline of April 30th, 2024. So that piece of it is not in any way impacting it. I would really appreciate if we listen, because I was very concerned that HSH had not dropped the document to public facilities until into the Friday packet, like maybe 2 weeks ago. So we weren't even privy to that data, and that was very disconcerting for me. I felt like that should have been brought to the table. It had an April 30th date on it. And I believe that we would have been better suited if in fact in public facilities we had access to that document. So if there's any way to recommit it with a deadline of one session, I would be very supportive of that.
In answer to that, I don't think we can put a deadline on when a committee will decide something. Certainly, if it is recommitted, I'll confer with Chair Albright about the most efficient way of proceeding, but we have, I want to be clear, we have no guarantees that it's going to be voted out in a single session, and I don't know what public facilities schedule is, nor the availability of the folks who need to be there to answer the question. So I think in fairness, it's a little bit of a wild card, although I can't speak for the chair, but I certainly would expect that if it is recommitted, that you'll make every effort to reconsider it expeditiously, but there's just no guarantee as to when or how that will be done. Is that fair summary, Chair Albright? All right. Next, we have Councilor Leary, then Councilor Lobovitz. You've been very patient, Councilor Leary. Go ahead, please, and then Councilor Lobovitz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief. I actually wanted to respond a little bit to Councilor Farrell's concerns about enforcement and speed. And you're quite right. The police, it's difficult to enforce via the police. How we really enforce speed limits is the design of the street. That's the real factor in reducing speeds, and that's what we're doing here. You can slow down speeds by adding bike lanes, trees, curvature, paint, to narrowing the road, narrowing the lane. Those are all ways that we reduce speeds. People don't look at the speed limit sign so much. At least many of us don't, but they certainly do slow down when they see pedestrians, when they see bicyclists, when they see the road narrowing, when they see a lot of trees. All those things are helpful in reducing speeds. And so what we really need to do is design the streets for the speeds we want. Because Washington Street right now invites speeds of 50 miles an hour or more. It's a big, wide, open street. Let's please vote this out this evening. I'm also very concerned about the tight timeline that it might, if we don't vote it tonight, that this project could be killed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Last word, Councilor Lobovitz.
Thank you, everyone, for your thoughtful comments. I think
we're losing a little bit of understanding of what this is about. I think people have gone a little bit astray in the sense that there's overwhelming consensus that we need to get this done. So I think it's more a question of this timeline that we were just discussing. I do believe that there are substantive questions that still need to be answered. I think that can be done expeditiously, and I think if it's done in a reasonable way, the responses are reasonable from the planning department, I think we can get this done in the time frame that we want. We're not talking about a limitless number of questions. We're talking about a limited number of questions, but they are substantive and they're important to answer. I would want to echo what Councilor Getz said in terms of getting information at the last minute that is important for our decisions. I think we should note that and try to avoid that in the future. The last thing I would say is Councilor Oliver has brought up some issues. I was at a meeting with him recently with the planning department, mostly to observe. I thought that his questions and concerns were substantive and important to answer. And what I'd like to note is that the planning department made some changes, I think, just recently in response to those concerns and those questions. So I think we should give a little bit more time to allow those questions, the other questions, to be asked and answered. Doesn't mean we have to accept the answers or continue to allow more and more questions and concerns to be expressed and stretch this out forever. I think it can be done in a time-limited way, and I think we owe our fellow councilors the opportunity to ask those questions and have them answered. So I will be voting in favor of this resolution.
Thank you, Councilor Lobovitz. And this is also your initial speech this evening. Eloquent comments by all our colleagues, especially our two new ones who've spoken for the first time this evening. So with that, I don't see anyone else who wishes to speak. So we're going to call the roll. Let me be clear on what we're voting for. An aye or a yes is in favor of the motion to send this back to committee. A no is to keep it here. If it's an aye or a yes, it goes back to committee. Councilor Albright will figure out how to schedule it and try to take it up, I hope, expeditiously. If it's a no vote, we proceed on to the main item. My expectation, colleagues, is if it's a no vote, we've had sufficient discussion tonight. There won't be much additional comment, if any, on the main item, and we can take a vote. But really, first, we're voting on the motion. An aye or a yes is to send it back to committee. A no is to consider the item this evening. Go ahead, please.
Councilor Albright. Councilor Baker.
Aye.
Councilor Bixby.
No.
Councilor Block.
Aye.
Councilor Danberg.
No.
Councilor Downs.
No.
Councilor Farrell.
Aye.
Councilor Gentile.
No.
Councilor Getz.
Aye.
Councilor Greenberg.
No.
Councilor Grossman.
No.
Councilor Humphrey.
No.
Councilor Kalis.
No.
Councilor Kelly.
No.
Councilor Krinsman.
No.
Councilor Leary.
No.
Councilor Lipoff.
No.
Councilor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Councilor Lucas.
Aye.
Councilor Malachy.
Aye.
Councilor Mickley.
No.
Councilor Oliver.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion fails with 10 yeas and 14 nays.
Councilor Gentile.
So I wanted to speak on the main item. I believe
Please
this
go
is
ahead.
the appropriate time.
Comment on the main items, totally welcome.
I've been quiet till now. Anyway, just a
Duly
couple.
noted, Councilor Gentile. Go
Just
ahead, please.
a couple of quick points. The 10-year time frame, as I understood it, was always about not just to have an extended pilot, though I believe we need an extended pilot, not necessarily 10 years, but it was more being realistic about when we would be able to get back in line for MassWorks money or some source of money from the state. That's really what was driving that 10-year number. But anyway, when we took this up, the 75% plan in public facilities, I asked if the 100% design plans were coming back to us, and I was told that they were not, which I think is unfortunate, because there were some suggestions that were made, some very specific suggestions, like people were saying earlier that we should be making, that were made, and we don't know what is going to happen between planning and our consultant, if they're going to take any of the suggestions that we made and adjust the pilot that we saw. I mean, we've been talking about this since we started talking about the Washington Street Vision Plan. I mean, I was the person that I remember going to Newton North for one of the big meetings that took the picture of the boulevard because I was intrigued by it. And knowing my colleagues the way I do, whether I liked a pilot or a redesign of Washington Street, it's been clear to me that it's coming. So I started floating that document around a long time ago, not as the do-all and end-all, but at least for something to be considered. And, you know, and there are some aspect of that that's what's in the pilot. Now, I heard everybody say that if something goes wrong, it's only paint and plastic, and I agree with that. But it's also very important to try and get as much right with the pilot as you can. Otherwise, all you're going to do is tick people off. And there are people out there, a lot of people, that are waiting to be ticked off, just want a reason. So one of the things that I mentioned, it's really the only thing I mentioned in PF, is that when you are heading east on Washington Street from West Newton Square to Newtonville Square, my concern is that at most of the side streets, you had a dedicated left-hand turn lane. But there are two streets that do not. And my concern is we only have one lane. And at those two streets, at many times of the day, if even one person is looking to turn left onto Parsons or left onto, I think it's Harrington, and there's some traffic on the other side, you're going to cause a backup, to me, which is unnecessary. To me, it would be easier to put those left turn lanes in because it's a lot easier to remove them than to put them in. And I thought it was a reasonable request, but I don't know what happened to the request because nothing is coming back to us. So I just want to put that back on the record, that I hope that planning and the consultants will take a serious look at that, because I, like many of you or all of you, want this pilot to be successful. I don't want it to be unsuccessful. And that's why I think people who wanted to send it back were trying to make sure that as many things that could be right or made right were done so the pilot is successful. So again, I hope that planning and HS, whatever it is, take it seriously and think about putting in those left turn lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard on the main item? Councilor Leary?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make sure that people know that I'm in full support of Councilor Gentile's Boulevard design, which I loved from the get-go. And I hope we could at some point see that. And I just wanted to say that if and when we approve this tonight, and I hope we approve it, that we still can continue to make suggestions, to work with planning, to work with traffic. I mean, this is a dynamic, fluid kind of thing. The discussion won't end here. This is where the discussion will really start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Anyone else? Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just going to add the two concerns that I raised earlier, but I hope will be addressed properly. The issue of short-term parking, people putting flashers on in a single lane. I know this is an issue that we've seen in downtown Boston. I know that many of you come down Tremont Street, which used to be wider. It basically has become a one-lane street because of the short-term pickup and drop-off by both commercial vendors as well as ride sharing. And then the newest problem we've seen a good deal of are the motor scooters who are making deliveries now going the wrong way on the bike lanes at high speed. And so these are the kinds of things that are happening in downtown Boston. I hope they don't reach out here, but I do think the pilot has to be prepared for this new world of what's going on in transportation and take account of it. So I will vote for this, but I hope that those issues can be addressed.
Thank you. Councilor Mickley, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'm planning to support this, but I do think this is a good opportunity to offer more public criticism of the current design. My biggest critique is that it's not ambitious enough in the goals. The 20% increase in biker ridership, I just think is not enough to get us excited about doing this permanently. So I hope that we can see those goals raised and elevated, 50% increase or even more. Peak hours, peak days, we have about 100 riders, so talking about an extra 20 bikers, I think we really should be doing better than that. And if there are any ideas about ways that this body can continue to be a body that holds this pilot accountable towards the important questions that Councilor Oliver and others were raising, I would definitely be open to supporting that as well while moving forward too.
All right, folks, are we ready? Thank you, Councilor Mickley. Please call the roll. Again, if you vote aye or in favor, you're voting in favor of the pilot. If you're voting no, you're voting against the pilot. Go ahead, please.
Councilor Albright.
Aye.
Councilor Baker.
Aye.
Councilor Bixby.
Aye.
Councilor Block.
No.
Councilor Danberg.
Aye.
Councilor Downs.
Aye.
Councilor Farrell.
No.
Councilor Gentile.
Aye.
Councilor Getz.
Aye.
Councilor Greenberg.
Aye.
Councilor Grossman.
Aye.
Councilor Humphrey.
Aye.
Councilor Kalis.
Aye.
Councilor Kelly.
Aye.
Councilor Krinsman.
Aye.
Councilor Leary.
Aye.
Councilor Lipoff.
Aye.
Councilor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Councilor Lucas.
No.
Councilor Maliki.
Aye.
Councilor Mickley.
Aye.
Councilor Oliver.
No.
Councilor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 20 yeas, 4 nays.
Thank you, colleagues. So we have one item on, more item on second call. This is 4924. This is electrification. This was approved by zoning, and Councilor Chair Baker, would you report out the item, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, the committee report that went out is a substantial document, which I won't try and recapitulate because this item has been before us before, but I want to just highlight a major revision in what happened to the ordinance so that we can be clear about what the impacts are. One of the questions that had been before us earlier was the impact on a property that was renovated. What would happen to the part that was not renovated as opposed to what was going to be changed? And the change that we got clarification from the state about is that the property that is not renovated does not have to become electrified. The whole project itself, the new part, has got to take care of electrification, but the old part doesn't have to participate.
Walker, stay here.
Did I miss something?
Go right ahead, please, Councilor Baker. I don't know what that was.
So there was an extended discussion in committee, and also direct your attention to a memorandum that was prepared for the committee by Ms. Berwick, which gave some examples and explained in detail the nature of the particular impacts that this would have. We have an ordinance already, not an ordinance actually, we have a code, electrical code that the city has adopted, which requires properties to be made electric ready. What we're doing is participating as one of a 10-community pilot of the idea of having, going a step farther to require the electrification of the new area and the new construction. So that was the conversation we had in committee, and we have attached to the report a copy of the draft ordinance as revised, approved as to form and character, and I would move the report.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Gentile, you placed this on second call.
Excuse me, I forgot to give the vote. The vote was, I believe we had 7-0, Councilor Kalis not voting.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Gentile, you placed this on second call. Go ahead, please.
Actually, I'm not sure if I did, but I'm happy to speak because I did want to offer an amendment. I think it was the committee actually had it on second call, but I don't think it's really important.
Doesn't matter. It's on second call. You have an amendment. Why don't you proffer your amendment? We'll see if there's a second, and then we'll discuss the amendment. We'll go back to the main item after. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you. So I wanted to just make one point before I offered the amendment. And the point that I wanted to make is, I think most people are certainly aware of the Math Save program. And in the Math Save program, if you convert to a electrified heat pump system, as you know, you're eligible for rebates, and there are a lot of restrictions and so forth. One of the things that you're not required to do is, if it's a renovation, is to remove your existing heating system. And I've had some conversations with Ms. Berwick because I wanted to make sure that in our ordinance for renovations, the people were not required to remove their existing system. They obviously are required to do a fully electrified heat pump system with, splits or whatever, but they do not have to remove the existing system, which to me is important for two reasons. Number one, in extremely cold weather in particular, the existing system could work as a backup. And the second point is to have to remove, like an older system can be pretty expensive. It can add a significant amount of money. And Ms. Berwick assured me that there is nothing in this ordinance, or at least this version, that requires a homeowner to do that. So I want to make sure that that's on the record. And then secondly, the amendment that I wanted to offer, it's pretty simple and straightforward. I put together my own draft, but I then ran it by Attorney Lee. We both agreed it was probably best if we went with his version, which is what Ms. Moore has. And all I'm simply trying to do is to add to the list of exemptions indoor or outdoor cooking appliances. As I said in committee the other night, I find it very troubling that the Newton City Council would attempt to tell any constituent what they can or cannot cook with, which is what the ordinance as it's currently crafted does. So this would remove that restriction, and everything that is highlighted is in the current ordinance is only highlighted because it refers to cooking appliances. And so it looks like a lot, but again, it is only designed to add indoor or outdoor cooking appliances to the exemption list. I have one request. You probably hear from someone here in the chamber that this is something that we can't do because the state will not approve the item. Please understand that our law department has been in contact with DOER to get an opinion if in fact that is the case. In other words, would they reject this ordinance because it does not have a restriction on, say, a gas stove? And they have not heard back. So I'm just asking you to give it some thought. Do you really think that we should be in the business of telling people what they can use as an appliance to cook? Or do you think that it crosses a line, as I do? And just vote on that question. And if in fact my amendment is successful, it goes into the state. And if the state should in fact reject what we sent to them for that reason, then it comes back to us and you can make the change. But for now, please don't be swayed by somebody saying that the state won't accept it. Because I checked as recently as today with Attorney Lee, no, Friday, Friday, he had not heard back. He didn't expect to hear back. So let's just vote on the substance and let the state do whatever they feel they want to do. And that's all that I have.
All right, so is there a second for the amendment? Second for the amendment by Councilor Farrell. All right, so we are now going to be discussing the amendment. I have Councilor Downs, Baker, Humphrey, Krinsman. Councilor Downs.
Thank you, and I appreciate my colleague from Ward 4 doing the research and putting together this amendment. My understanding, and I'm asking through you, President Laredo, you're looking to amend exception number 4, 3 and 4, freestanding outdoor cooking appliances that are not connected to the building's natural gas or propane. You would put in freestanding or otherwise indoor or outdoor cooking appliances. Is that correct?
Through the chair, President, go ahead, Councilor Gentile. You can respond.
I don't know if you can read it, but it's up.
Can't read it, sorry.
It's a yellow line version, but red line version is,
Yeah,
it's
I think-
highlighted.
I think I have that here, and it's the same thing. It says freestanding in the original exceptions, freestanding outdoor cooking appliances that are not connected to the building's natural gas or propane infrastructure. You would add indoor to that?
No, that all goes away, and it just says in item number D3, it just says outdoor or indoor cooking appliances. The rest of that sentence goes away.
Okay, thank you.
So just so I want to be, if I could take a moment to clarify, I just want to be very clear. So the amendment strikes the current language and replaces it with indoor and outdoor cooking appliances, and they all would be on the exempt list according to your amendment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is everyone clear on that? Thank you, Councilor Downs, for the inquiry. That was helpful, but go ahead, please.
Thank you. I have no problem with outdoor cooking appliances in the original. And the reason that they were separated from natural gas lines is because our understanding from the state and from inquiries to the state or previous work by the Energy Commission was that indoor gas appliances and outdoor gas appliances that were attached to a natural gas pipeline coming in from the street were what explicitly they did not think were covered under the 10 Communities Law. In other words, we can't add them in. We can't exempt them. But should the state come back, of course, we can work on that. I wouldn't do it, and I would advise us not to do it. There's another reason why we might not want to include gas or exclude gas stoves and allow them in kitchens in the substantial renovations. This is really for new construction and substantial renovations of more than half of the house or over 1,000 square feet, as I understand it from reading the materials. The gas stove doesn't just cook your food. It, even when off, releases methane into the inside of your home. It's a known cause of childhood asthma. It's a known cause, a known carcinogen. High, I believe it's nitrogen oxide emissions. We just switched to an electric induction stove for just that reason, at some expense, but I did get my rebate. And the other real benefit, and so it's in a way a consumer protection measure. But the other nice thing about the induction stove, besides boiling water way faster than gas, is that it does not heat up the kitchen at the same time as it's heating up your food. So on a night like this, it was particularly welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to follow up just a bit on clarifying the impact of this. I spoke with Attorney Lee today and also Ms. Berwick, and again, there's no further information from the state. The choice before the council is whether to adopt this amendment or not is a matter of policy, but as a matter of impact on the ordinance, my understanding is that if the state disapproves of this, as Councilor Gentile indicated, it would be communicated to us and we would be open to move an amendment. If we're talking about amendments in general, they're going to have to be approved by the state. If for some reason, as we go forward with this, again, Attorney Lee indicated, and the whole ordinance was not working, we could repeal it and go back to where we are. But I think the point is that we are not necessarily, I think, making a decision tonight based on whether the state will approve or disapprove. I'm not optimistic about that, but I just want to indicate that I think Councilor Gentile's characterization is accurate. As to the policy, I'm going to vote for this amendment, and I've changed my mind about it simply because I would like to see this ordinance come out of the council with as strong a vote as we can, because we're asking our citizens to undertake something different than they've been used to. And I would like to have them have a sense that there is at least an opportunity, if there is one, if someone wants to preserve, as part of a renovation that they want to do, an existing gas stove. And I know there are people that are very partial to their gas stoves, and I happen to have one as my wife. And I think that there would be I would have a constituent problem here on my hands if we did a renovation without offering her that opportunity. I'm not saying we will, but I'm just pointing out that I think people feel strongly about it. And I think that the chances of this being done are relatively small. I think the environmental impact is going to be even smaller. And therefore, for this reason, I'm going to support the amendment with the understanding that if indeed it is turned aside by the state, that I will dock it, and I hope Councilor Gentile would join in it, an amendment to take back the ordinance to its original form, if the amendment passes. It may not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Humphrey, then Councilor Krinsman, and then Councilor Albright, and Councilor Leary. Go ahead, Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I wanted to build on some of the points that Councilor Downs had raised, but also actually counter a couple of things that just came up from Councilor Baker. So let's zoom out from the kitchen itself here, especially looking at the first part of the proposed amendment here. What we're talking about is not just about how you're cooking something in the house or how you're, what your preferences are. We're also talking about an infrastructural question here, especially when it comes to new construction, not just renovation projects. So please keep that in mind as well with this amendment when we're thinking about new construction. Let's say everything else in the new construction is off of fossil fuels. You have now done a gas hookup to this new construction solely for the purpose of making sure that they have the option which they may not even want if it's a homeowner buying from a contractor, developer, right, to do gas cooking in their kitchen. So part of the objective of this legislation and the 10 communities pilot overall is to start moving us away from these legacy hookups to the grid overall. And we can't move away from the grid overall if we're continuing to add new hookups. And so that's a key point when it comes to this issue around the cooking infrastructure. Going back into the kitchen itself, to build on what Councilor Downs was talking about, you know, our house also similarly made a change relatively recently, and I'm not here to necessarily evangelize that. I will say that I think a lot of the preference stuff is based more in tradition and vibes rather than actual practice and science. I understand people may disagree with that, but I would encourage people to, you know, check it out. But what we do know on the scientific front, we know from front page stories in the Boston Globe looking at the research on this, we know from the research that one of my former constituents did extensively, that this is a huge source of very dangerous pollutants in the home. And I'm not saying that as any kind of judgment. Like I said, we just only recently changed from gas ourselves. But it's not just methane, it's a whole bunch of other horrible things that are coming into the home that are being exposed to our children and other folks through the use of the cooking process. And so, as Councilor Downs said, this does get into consumer protection issues. This is about a public health and safety measure that we need to be undertaking. And we do this kind of stuff, whether it's at the federal or state level on things like seat belts, on tobacco, or even in this body on tobacco and smoking. We do undertake these types of measures where we're saying, yes, I understand you have a preference here, and this is going to inconvenience you in some way, but we're trying to make a decision that is for your benefit and for the greater good. So I think we're trying to accomplish a number of things here that are really critical that I think this amendment would actually fundamentally undermine, and especially when we're talking about the overall infrastructure out in the world, not just to an individual home, but to all of these homes we're talking about. I think this is critically important that we keep it as proposed and not amend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. Councilor Krinsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've spoken to a number of people about this, and am on the Zoning and Planning Committee, obviously, when we were taking this up, so I've been listening intently as the discussion went on. I think that the future of cooking is probably electric. I think the electric stoves are getting better and better. I think induction cooking is also being used more and more, and folks are more and more likely to put all-electric kitchens in their homes. However, that's a little different than us requiring them to put an electric kitchen into their home if they prefer to cook with gas and if they prefer to use gas appliances. The one piece of this ordinance that troubled me when we did it, not to the point of voting against it, again, I would vote for it one way or the other here, but the one piece that was troubling to me was the stove piece and the people who wanted to put in gas kitchens. At one point we thought that a substantial renovation was going to cause gas to be removed from the entire home, and people were going to have to give away their, or replace their gas stoves, even if they were doing a renovation, say to the second floor, nowhere to do with the kitchen. That's not the case now. So we got assurances that that's not the case. However, I still don't like the idea of forcing someone who wants to renovate their kitchen to suddenly replace their kitchen appliances as well. Again, if they prefer to cook with gas. So I'm going to support this amendment. I'm going to support the ordinance one way or the other, but I do think it's a good idea for us to do this to not enrage our constituents who are passionate about this, and there are some folks who are very passionate about this, and I'm with them, so I'm going to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Albright.
Thank you, Mr. President. And maybe this is a question through you to either Councilor Gentile or Councilor Baker. Do we have assurances that if the, I mean, Ms. Berwick told us that she's pretty sure the state doesn't agree to this in the 10 Communities program, but do we have assurance that if we pass this amendment tonight, that they will give us a second chance to fix it?
So I'll let Councilor Baker go first, and then Councilor Gentile if he has any information on that. Councilor Baker?
I don't have any indication from the state one way or the other, except that when I was talking with Attorney Lee and Ms. Berwick this afternoon about this question, she did not give the prospect of a positive response from the state, But I think that the state is interested in having Newton participate in the 10 communities. I don't foresee us being dropped from the 10 communities program because of this amendment if the state disapproved it. If the state comes back and say, we don't like this amendment, and we say, well, we want to keep it, then we might put ourselves at risk. But I would think we would have an opportunity to remedy the situation well before the effective date. The effective date is not until the end of the year. So that was one of the points Attorney Lee made to me this afternoon when we were having our planning meeting, was that we had ample time to hear from the state and to respond appropriately. There is a risk if we adopt this and then the council and the state says no, then we might not be able to participate in the 10 communities program. So there is that risk. But I think the risk is relatively small based on my understanding.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Gentile, do you want to respond further?
I have been under the impression in discussions with the folks that have been leading on this issue here in the city that because the date is the end of this calendar year, that we would have the opportunity to amend if the state looked at this unfavorably. But I have not asked that very specific question.
Councilor Albright, do you want to speak further then?
I'll just say thank you very much for that information, and I'm going to just second the comments made by Councilor Humphrey about the, the whole reason for this is to try and get rid of the gas infrastructure. And I did consult with a few chefs that I know that are, even restaurants are moving to induction cooking, and that was sort of heartening to hear about that. I'm not sure how I'll vote on the amendment, but I'm not happy about having it. Thank you.
Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to align myself with the comments of Councilor Humphrey, who I thought was very eloquent and actually hit the nail on the head. The whole point of being part of the 10 Communities Act is to get off fossil fuels, and allowing a gas hookup to a home solely for cooking undermines the complete effort. So if you're voting for that amendment, you're voting that this 10 community, our participation is null and void, because our already the specialized code does everything but say you have to get off gas. So it's a huge incentive. We're going towards electrification. We don't want to have a redundant gas system that costs millions or billions even to continue to maintain and keep. We need to get off fossil fuels as soon as we can. We're already seeing the terrible impacts of it. So I can't say more clearly, we need to pass this without the amendment and keep it pure. We need to get off fossil fuels. That is the future. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Councilor Lucas, Councilor Baker.
Just a process question. Councilor Gentile put down, recommended 2 amendments. So I believe we have 2 different votes on the amendments. Is it just one amendment as a whole package, or?
It's going to be one as a whole package unless there's a good reason to split it up.
Okay, I was a little unclear on that. I thought it was 2 amendments and 2 votes.
We're going to do one vote because it's a motion to make 2 changes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Baker. Oh, Councilor Gentile?
I just want to make sure that I didn't confuse anyone. When you say 2 changes, the first thing that I mentioned was I just wanted to make a point, it wasn't an amendment in any way, that you are not required by this ordinance to remove your existing system. That's the conversation that I had. So that was a point that I wanted to get onto the record. As far as the cooking, the main change is where Councilor Downs mentioned under Section D. Anything else that's in there in red line, it just strikes and cooking. That's all that it does, just to be consistent throughout the ordinance to show that the cooking process is being removed from the restrictions that are talked about in the rest of the ordinance. I mean, even in the beginning of it.
I think, Councilor Gentile, I think the intent is pretty clear here, and I think we've answered Councilor Lucas's question. It is a single motion because you're just trying to make the language in the ordinance consistent, correct?
It's a single motion to place cooking on the exempted list, and anywhere else in the ordinance, the words cooking was struck. That's all that it is.
All right, next, all set, Councilor Lucas? All right, Councilor Baker, Councilor Downs, Councilor Farrell, and let's see if we can take a vote.
So I think I'm very sympathetic to the point that's just been made by Councilor Leary. I just want to point out, however, that there's a substantial portion of the city that is not going to change from its existing dependence on gas and other fossil fuels. We're talking about renovation, substantial renovation and new construction. And so we're talking about in those situations only, the opportunity to preserve a gas stove if someone wants to do that. That's all. You can't put in a gas heating system, you can't gas hot water. This is only a very limited exception. Again, to my way of thinking, while I agree as a matter of policy, we would like to go there completely. As a matter of practicality, I think this will enhance the enforceability of the ordinance and make it more acceptable to the public. So that's why I'm going to support it.
Councilor Downs?
I have a clarification question and then a comment.
Go ahead, please, with your question.
The way that Councilor Gentile's amendment reads, if we pass it, does that mean we have to reconfigure things to add outdoor cooking back in if we remove outdoor and indoor cooking? Do you know what I'm saying? You don't think so?
Through me
Through
to
you.
Councilor Baker.
I looked at the amendment that was drafted with the assistance of the law department. Basically, there is an existing exemption for outdoor cooking that's separated from the structure itself, so that you can maintain that as the current language.
As I read it, it strikes the entire outdoor cooking.
That's a question through the president.
Please.
Sure,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It's just that the exception D3 is entirely struck and replaced.
It just, as I understand it, the way that it's framed as the replacement, it just says that indoor or outdoor cooking is exempt.
Okay.
So that's really, it doesn't mean the outdoor goes away.
But
It's just,
if indoor and outdoor cooking, if the indoor part of that has to go away,
then we have to restore this language.
okay.
Okay?
That's what I
That's
wanted to
your
know. That was my
question, and now you have a
clarification.
comment. Go
And
ahead, please.
my comment is just, you know, it may seem like a minor thing, but to reemphasize what my colleague from Ward 5 has said, you have the gas hookup now on a new construction. So, you know, you're building new. I know it's a small number of buildings. It's a start to get at least our newest buildings, which we hope will be around by 2050, when the state has committed to get off gas and all fossil fuels. It's a start. So if you get that gas line into that house just for the stove, it's going to be quite expensive, number one. And number two, it's going to mean that you have that gas hookup that then has to come back all the way to the street. It's an additional expense for that homeowner who may or may not want a gas stove. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Councilor Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I guess I would like a clarification when I go home tonight. If a person is not going to renovate their home in excess of 50% of the existing structure, and they already have gas, then they can keep gas?
I don't think it's 50%. I think it's 1,000 square feet. Am I correct?
All right.
I want to ask the chair of...
There are thresholds that trigger the application of the existing energy code. And it talks about what a substantial renovation is. And those are in excess of 1,000 square feet of conditioned floor area, In addition, they're laid out in the ordinance. I can't recite them from memory as well as I'd like to. But the point is, if you're going home and doing nothing to your house, nothing is going to change as a result of this ordinance.
But can I just clarify, if you're going to build, say, a family room and a second floor addition, and it's going to be more than 1,000 square feet, even if you have a 3,000 square foot home, will that trigger the ordinance?
My understanding, yes, that you're a substantial renovation. But again, these are thresholds as a part of the existing energy code, not the part of this.
I want to be, I think we ought to be clear. So, Councilor Albright, I'm going to recognize you quickly, and I'll come back to you, Councilor
I
Farrell.
think what we learned was that if you're going to do a family room and a second floor addition that's more than 1,000 square feet, but you don't touch the kitchen, nothing changes in your kitchen. You keep your gas.
Is that, that's your understanding of the ordinance?
Absolutely. That was what was in the memo from Ms. Berwick, and the Commissioner of ISD told us
So that would not be considered a substantial revision or addition?
It's a substantial renovation, but if it doesn't include, if your renovation does not include your kitchen, you don't have to change the kitchen.
If I could, to just clarify, because this is actually, I think, very important for our consideration. Your belief, and I'm going to recognize, Councilor Gentile, do you want to respond? If you have the information, please do.
I just want to say that Council Albright is 100% correct. It was a change that was made in the latest version. Prior to that, it wasn't clear. But if you, whether it's 1,000-foot addition or 2,000 feet, if you don't touch the kitchen, you're not affected by the ordinance.
Okay.
And the other point to Councilor Downs, the version that's in front of you is not, you can rest assured and be comfortable, it's not Councilor Gentile's version. Councilor Gentile explained to Councilor Lee, and he knew because he was at the meeting, that I wanted to exempt cooking, indoor and outdoor. He took my idea, he made all those changes, so it's the form, it's in the best form from the law department, not from me.
Okay. All right. Thank you, both councilors, for your clarification. Very helpful. Councilor Farrell, I interrupted you. Do you have anything further you want to say? All right. All right. Is there anyone else who, Councilor Krinsman?
Thank you. One clarification and one point on the amendment.
Please, go ahead.
The clarification is that everything that Councilor Albright and Gentile said is correct, but to be clear, what happens when you have a substantial renovation or 1,000-foot, it means that renovation has to be entirely electrical. Okay, so if you're adding in a heating system, if you're adding in, whatever you're adding in, it has to be completely electrified. What happens is if you're not touching the kitchen, you don't have to touch your stove. If your substantial renovation includes the kitchen, you do have to change your stove. Okay? Is that, okay.
Even if you weren't replacing your stove?
Correct.
Good. Go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to mention was commercial kitchens, because I asked about this in committee, and if you could put the amendment back up, there's an exemption in there which I'm told is supposed to sort of account for the commercial kitchen exemption, which is restaurants that obviously use gas stoves. It's the final exemption. No, if you go forward another page, it's number, back a page, sorry. It's number 8 in the exemptions. Yeah, fossil fuels for process loads for manufacturing, industrial, and commercial purposes. I asked the Commissioner of Inspectional Services how that's going to work, what we're going to do about that, and it's not very clear to any of us. So I'm still a little uncertain that that is going to sufficiently cover commercial kitchens and allow restaurants that go in and need to utilize gas from going in. Very quickly, in rebuttal to the points that are made about new construction, I think a lot of new construction is being totally electrified now, especially because it is so costly. So I'm a little skeptical that someone, again, not the homeowner, but a contractor, is going to construct a kitchen and add the cost of gas without being certain about who the end user is and that the end user wants gas. So I can see that cutting both ways. Let me put it that way. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Humphrey, go ahead, please.
Just to respond to that last point, Mr. President, I have, for the past 4.5 years, been voting no on all of the grants of location for new natural gas hookups to protest that and point it out to my colleagues and draw attention to how many of them there are. We know how many of them there are every year. They're coming through year after year after year. This is sort of the core of why we're doing this entire effort, why we are trying to be one of the 10 communities. If we allow new gas hookups for cooking in new construction, we have defeated the entire purpose of being part of the 10 Communities pilot program for the state. Thank you.
Councilor Gentile, and then you're good. Okay. Anybody else wish to be heard in the item? So we have a motion before us. The motion is from Councilor Gentile. It is a single motion. It is to replace certain language in the proposed ordinance with language which would exempt indoor and outdoor cooking. It's a general summary. If you vote yes or aye, you're voting in favor of the amendment. If you vote no, you're voting against the amendment. We're then going to go back and consider the main item either way. Call the roll, please.
Counselor Albright.
No.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
No.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
No.
Counselor Downs.
No.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
No.
Counselor Grossman.
No.
Counselor Humphrey.
No.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
No.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff.
No.
Counselor Lobovitz.
No.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 13 yeas, 11 nays.
Councilor Humphrey?
I would at this point want to get some extra time to prepare an amendment text that would split this in terms of new versus renovation, in case that would make a difference. Recognizing that the hour is late and that you probably don't want to be doing a recess, I'm going to suggest that we do a charter on this to the next regularly scheduled meeting. If anyone wants to join me on that, I understand it's not optimal.
Are you chartering the item now?
Well, I'm asking for, unless I can't because it's already been considered on the previous meeting, is that the objection there?
My understanding is before the council before and was recommitted, so I don't think it's available
Okay.
for a charter.
Understood. In that case, can I get a 5-minute recess to work on wordsmithing the language for splitting this to differentiate between new construction and renovation?
Any objection? I'm perfectly happy to give you the time to do something, Councilor Gentile.
The other option would be, and I don't know if I'm speaking on my own behalf or not, but would be to ask to lay it on the table to a date certain, which would be the next meeting. So you're not rushing. So that's, I believe that would be in order, Mr. President.
Are we under any time constraint here, Chair Baker?
If you want to do that, I would recommend a postponement to the date certain. That way you don't have to vote to take it off. It just comes back.
Okay.
Are you moving to postpone this to a date certain,
Sure,
which is 2
that
weeks
seems
from
like the
tonight?
most reasonable way of handling this. Again, I would have preferred to, deal with this tonight, but I think that this is a fairly substantive change to the underlying docket item, and that I think also the administration would probably have some concerns here as well.
So there's a motion to postpone to a date certain. Do I have a second for the motion? Seconded by Councilor Albright. Let's see if we can do this in a voice vote. All in favor of postponement to a date certain, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, it's postponed to a date certain. Councilor Downs. The 17th of June.
Councilor Laredo, I am a little late at doing this, but I would like to move reconsideration of the Washington Street item. Is that still possible?
I don't think you can do that anymore. It's been done.
Okay.
Okay? All right. We are, Councilor Oliver, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, we are adjourned, colleagues. Thank you all very much. And thank you all for a very productive, thoughtful discussion this evening.